gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? By Great 78.
Who gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? I've seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, it's fine with me. With me.
Chapter 19. Hey, Jupiter. Hermione. Monday, October 18th, 1999. Pegwater Flat 307, Christchurch College, Oxford, England. The following morning dawned sunny, and after a second night to sleep on her thoughts about Draco and Amelia, Hermione resolved to make a fresh start with the Slytherin in the sitting room. Draco was still asleep when she emerged for breakfast. Toasting a few slices of bread, she gathered the orange marmalade from the refrigerator, then summoned the speculoos butter from the cupboard. A quick intake of breath alerted her to his watchful gaze upon her. Hermione's eyes widened as they flew to meet his. How long had he been staring at her? "Oi, Malfoy, Draco, you're awake," she said unnecessarily. "Good morning. Sorry I woke you." Draco looked sinfully sleepy. His cheeks were flushed pink, high on his cheekbones, and his blonde hair mussed in a way that stoked the blasted fire that seemed to simmer in her belly every time she was around him. He slowly rose, pulling on a pair of grey joggers that he'd summoned from the floor, the same way Ron had summoned his dirty jumper their last day together. She recalled how Ron had hugged her, pressing her face against the jumper on their last day. This thought somehow transformed in her imagination to doing the same to the front of Draco's joggers. She huffed in a breath as her eyes flicked down to the front of the soft grey trousers, which bulged delightfully. "Get a fucking grip!" she chided herself angrily, feeling heated embarrassment rise in her own cheeks. After a moment of pleasant niceties, Draco had the complete lack of wherewithal to ask, "Did anything happen at the cafe that I wasn't aware of? You seemed distracted after? When you were talking to—" She shook her head fiercely. It was childish, she knew, but she didn't want him to say Amelia's name. She didn't know if she could bear it this early in the morning. "No, not at all. I just had a lot to think about. Classes, you know." Draco seemed to take her at her word and said nothing. Apparently she had not tortured herself enough this morning, because then she asked, "So, did you have a good time the other night?" "The other night?" Hermione lifted her chin in challenge. "Yes. Saturday night. Didn't you go out?" Yes, we did, but we didn't stay out very long." "I think that's lovely," she answered, and to her ears it almost sounded as though she meant it. True to his word, Jason was an excellent note-taker, she found. Comparing notes with him after criminal law, she saw that, as he wrote, he cross-referenced the textbook, as well as the supplemental readings. It was truly impressive. "Care to grab a coffee?" Jason asked casually when they were dismissed. I can't. I have an appointment," Hermione said apologetically. She actually had a magical law class immediately after this, but she could not exactly reveal this bit of information to him. "Another time?" He smiled at her. Hermione nodded warmly, then hurried from the classroom. Firstenkrantz Hall, the magical law building that stood unseen by Muggle eyes, was only a bit down from the Meadows building. She met Theo on the third-floor corridor. Draco's blonde head bobbed above the crowd several yards in front of them, out of earshot as they made their way slowly to the classroom. "Hermione, lovely to see you this morning. I missed you yesterday at the flat," the wizard said. Well, I was at the library all day. I'm trying to focus on my grades, especially the magical ones. You know how it is," she offered. Theo waved a hand as if to say he knew, but did not especially care. Hermione fought her eye roll. As a non-legacy student in the magical law program, She did not have the luxury of not caring about such things. "I was wondering, have you noticed anything out of the ordinary about Draco?" Theo asked suddenly, acting cagey, unexpected meetups, that sort of thing. So, she wasn't the only one who knew about Draco and Amelia. Hermione thought glumly. "Yes, I've noticed it." Theo seemed relieved. "Oh, so you already know about it. That's good. Well, I hope there's nothing too serious going on." Hermione gave him a wry grin in spite of herself. "Why? Do you plan to ask them to join you and your girlfriends for some of your group activities, Theo? Merlin!" Theo looked shocked for a moment, then huffed a nervous laugh. "Salazar's sack, I certainly can't see that happening. In fact, I would move heaven and earth to make sure that it didn't." "Huh," was her only response. She had rather assumed that Theo wouldn't object to either Draco or Amelia joining in on one of his orgies. The people coming in and out of Theo's room at Hogwarts had not been exclusively witches, after all. "In any case, if you see or hear anything suspicious, let me know," Theo said. "I need to pop into the loo before class. See you in there." Rushing to make it to potions licensing and regulations, she put all thoughts of Theo's orgies out of her mind. Back in the flat, she was excited to find a letter waiting for her on the kitchen table. For a brief moment she'd hoped it was from her parents. Instead, she recognized Harry's rushed capital script on the outer envelope. "Dear Hermione, it was great to hear from you. Training is brutal, as always, but it's going well, I think. Creature has been a good help, even though he still goes into Wahlberger's suite, caressing her shoes and whatnot. But he makes an excellent treacle tart, so I leave him to it. Are you absolutely certain that you're failing your classes, or is this just your usual Hermione reaction? Remember in third year how you were convinced that you were going to fail charms, but you ended up with the highest grade for the year? Don't sell yourself short, Hermione. You're going to do well, I'm sure of it. How is your flat? I hope things are going all right, living with Malfoy again. Are you regretting going against everyone's advice and testifying for him? Only kidding. I know you said he was tolerable enough last year. Hopefully you're able to at least ignore him for most of the time. Please, don't take this the wrong way, but does calling things quits with Ron have anything to do with your worry about your grades? If it's any consolation, I don't think this thing with Evelyn is very serious. He's brought her around a time or two, and she's nice enough, but she's nothing compared to the likes of you. Love, Harry. Opening the letter, she had been pleasantly surprised at its length, until she got to the end. She had no idea who Evelyn, or what this thing with her was, or how Harry thought it could possibly affect her grades. She teetered between annoyance and apathy. Now, on top of everything else, she needed to be concerned that her friends were pitying her for losing Ron to a girl named Evelyn. She tossed the letter in a top drawer of her desk, a problem to address another day. For now, her grades needed to be her biggest concern, no matter what Harry's thoughts on the subject. This was not like her third year grades meltdown. She was only a couple of weeks into term here at university, but she felt as though she was facing the very real risk of failure, in her magical classes at least. Was she truly cut out to succeed in the magical world? Had her successes at Hogwarts, and with Harry in his bid to defeat Voldemort, been simply flukes? No! She refused to accept that, and she would fight the very notion with everything she had, she thought. Still, the lingering voices of doubt whispered in the corners of her mind. Wednesday, October 20th, 1999. Jason, it turned out, was nearly perfect in almost every sense. As intelligent as he was fit, the man seemed to anticipate her wishes easily. Later that week, as they sat at the late dinner service in the great hall together, they were overtaken by a group of rowdy young men who came in to sit at their table, just in from an intramural football match. The men's boisterously loud discussion of saved goals, gravity-defying shots, and corner kicks immediately overtook their calm conversation about the Roman Empire.
Care to get out of here?"
Jason grinned, offering her his hand. It was pouring outside, and he produced a large umbrella from his bag.
The library's still open. I was thinking they might have the updated Ward translation of Camus' The Stranger. Shall we check?"
Hermione grinned at him. "Absolutely." They threaded their way through the stacks as quickly and quietly as they could. She could not help but feel like some sort of secret spy, evading capture by the enemy. In this case, the octogenarian librarian, who was so blind that he had not seen them slip by, even as he announced to the room at large that the library was closing in 30 minutes.
"It's round here, I think,"
Jason whispered with a sly grin, pulling her around a corner, deeper into the stacks. Her breath quickened. The bookworm inside of her had always entertained more than one daydream of a heavy snog, and maybe more, against the stacks, in an old library just like this one. The late hour and the fear of real punishment only made her arousal more acute. Her insides fluttered in excitement. "Here," he said. Caught up in the moment, Hermione threw her back against the bookcase behind her, her arms thrown wide to grab hold of the shelves behind her. She looked up coquettishly to catch Jason's brown eyes, to give him her most inviting look, to offer him a starring role in this particular fantasy. From over her left shoulder, he withdrew the slim text that he'd come to find.
"Only one copy here right now. I'll loan it to you when I'm done. Is that all right?"
he asked, looking up at her hopefully. Hermione paused, momentarily put out. Then she smiled and dropped her arms to her sides. "That'd be brilliant, thanks."
Jason returned her smile. "Great. That old codger said they were closing up soon. Come on, let's beat the line at the checkout desk."
She allowed herself a small sigh before pushing herself off the bookcase to follow him to the front of the library. Nearly perfect, in almost every sense, left a lot to be desired, she thought. Friday, October 22nd, 1999. Constitutional law that morning brought the announcement of the dreaded partnership project that Amelia had told her about nearly a week ago. Before Dr. Smith was even done discussing it, Amelia was nodding and smiling back at Hermione. After class, the tall woman threaded her way through the crowd towards her. Despite not wearing a single drop of makeup, Amelia's flawless skin seemed to glow, Hermione noted in agitation. She pushed away thoughts of what the woman had done to earn that dewy look, and stood up to greet her. "Hermione, I'm so glad we're going to be working together on this." Amelia's enthusiasm far outstripped the occasion of a school assignment. The taller woman dropped into Hermione's chair that she had just vacated, necessitating Hermione to move over one. She withdrew a small notebook and pen, poised to write. "What ideas do you have?" Hermione's eyebrows drew together. They had just been given this assignment 2 minutes before. She'd not even read the entire grading rubric yet. "I know, whatever you come up with will be fabulous," Amelia gushed. "I've got to confess, I'm not much of an ideas person, but I'm happy to help organize your ideas and work them into a more polished result." Hermione gritted her teeth and tried not to take that badly. She rather failed. "Amelia, to be entirely honest, I haven't had a moment to think about this project yet. Why don't we meet up this weekend, and we can discuss it more?" The other woman looked slightly taken aback. "Goodness, I thought for sure. Well, that's completely all right. We've got plenty of time." "Tomorrow is Saturday. How about 9? We can meet in the study carousels on the library first floor." It was Amelia's turn to hesitate. "I may go out tonight. 9's a bit early, yes?" Hermione breathed a quick sigh. "How about this? I'll go at 9 and get us started. You'll come as early as you can and meet me. Then we can work together. We should be able to make plenty of headway." Amelia gave her a winsome smile. "That sounds lovely!" Saturday, October 23rd, 1999. The sofa was empty when she got up at 8 o'clock that morning. Draco had told her and Theo yesterday after classes that he would be away for the entire weekend. She briefly wondered if, wherever he was, he had enjoyed sleeping in a bed for the first time in weeks. Then she wondered if he had slept in that bed alone, a thought she was happy to banish from her brain almost immediately. She showered and dressed, eating a quick breakfast to be at the library for 9, just in case Amelia decided to come on time. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, Hermione had completed about 30% of their partnership assignment, entirely alone. Apparently, whatever Amelia had gotten up to the night before with Malfoy had taken a lot out of her. Back in the still empty flat, Hermione slammed about in the cupboards, digging out the nearly forgotten jar of Nutella from the back of the cupboard. Slathering it thickly onto a piece of toast, she summoned the bottle of fire whiskey and poured a few inches into a glass. As she sat hunched over the tiny table in the kitchenette, her eyes glazed over at the sight of the mess of the flat. In addition to the more than 87 pairs of socks, she now counted 26 open cans of Muggle beer and 11 pizza crusts on a dirty plate. What sort of pizza even came with 11 slices? She thought to herself irrationally. Summoning a clean piece of parchment paper from her room, she charmed it red in colour and bit out the spell Temperleris. "Professor Slughorn, I don't know what you were thinking when you wrote the recommendation letter for our accommodations here at Oxford, but I do not appreciate the predicament I find myself in, and I have no one to blame but you. I will do all I can to make this work because I want to be here, sir. But in the future, before you send off a letter, you must take a moment to proofread." With another tap of her wand, the red page folded and sealed itself into a proper howler, and Hermione let herself into Theo's empty room to gain access to Edgar the Owl. She wasn't ordinarily one to send a howler, but the state of the sitting room was going from bad to worse by the day, somehow. Sending a howler to Professor Slughorn could not help the situation, but it had certainly made her feel better. Monday, October 25th, 1999. Even as Hermione continued to excel in her Muggle law studies, she found herself marginalized in her magical ones. For better or worse, her reputation preceded her. Every instructor had known her name before she even set foot on the campus. They had read the articles in the Daily Prophet, lauding her supposedly brilliant accomplishments. But likely, many of them had read the earlier articles as well, the ones that Skeeter had written years ago. Now, when presented with substandard work, the magical instructors at Oxford seemed almost ready to write her off. She was being overlooked in class, and the 2 papers that she'd turned in were given back to her with no comments. She took a small measure of comfort in knowing that at least she was doing well in her Muggle law studies. "Well, I suppose we know who'll be getting top honours this term," Jason joked with her that afternoon after tort law. They had just gotten back their papers on negligence and liabilities, and in addition to the perfect grade at the top of hers, the instructor had written a thoughtful and complimentary rebuttal at the end. Hermione blushed. "I'm not so sure about that, but thank you for the vote of confidence." They were passing through Meadowgate, and Jason spotted a sign for the upcoming Halloween soiree. "Hermione, if you're not already going with anyone else, would you like to accompany me to the soiree this weekend?" Her steps faltered for only a moment before she turned a beaming smile on him. "That sounds lovely. Shall we wear matching fancy dress?" Jason returned her smile, putting his arm around her waist and pulling her close to him. "That'd be brilliant. Have you any ideas?" She blushed. I've always been partial to Regency-inspired clothes. How do you feel about Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet?"
"I love it," he declared.
"That's wonderful, Jason." She found herself forcing a note of gaiety into her voice. She would never tell this to Jason. She honestly did not even wish to admit it to herself. But a part of her had hoped that she and Draco might go together to the soirée. It was mental to think that only 10 days ago she had seriously considered telling the wizard exactly how she felt about him. Now, she could only give a sigh of relief that she had not. It was obvious that he was focused on spending time with Amelia. There were some days that Hermione hardly saw him in their flat, and she had begun spending more time with Jason. She had to move on from her silly crush on Draco Malfoy.
"I'm looking forward to it,"
Jason said enthusiastically, squeezing her waist and dropping a quick kiss on her temple. Hermione smiled and turned her lips to his, accepting a quick, chaste kiss. "I am too," she said warmly. She could almost believe her own words. Tuesday, October 22nd, 1999. "Hermione, I am so sorry about this weekend. I stayed out far too late on Friday night, and so I slept most of Saturday. I really didn't mean to skip meeting with you, but I didn't have your telephone number." Amelia tossed her long auburn hair regretfully in a huge show of sorrowfulness. Constitutional law was set to begin in a few minutes. The day before, Dr. Smith had reviewed with them what would be expected, but Amelia had been absent. She gave the other woman a thin smile. "It's the same as Draco's number, remember? We live together. You could have asked him for it." Amelia's smile shrank just a bit, before she quickly answered, "Well, you know how he can be. A man of few words. Besides, he and I don't typically talk on the telephone." "Ah," said Hermione, scribbling the telephone number to their flat on a scrap of paper and handing it to the other woman. Of course, a pure-blood wizard wouldn't be familiar with using a muggle device, she scolded herself. "And what happened yesterday? You missed class, but Draco came home Sunday evening." "Oh, Amelia's brow furrowed in confusion for a moment before she recovered. "Well, my mum came for a surprise pop-in early Monday morning. She wanted to go for brunch, and then we went shopping and got facials at that adorable little salon in Abington. I told her I had classes, but you know how mothers can be. When they drop everything to spend the day with you, you can't very well say no, am I right?" Hermione, who had not exchanged a civil word with her mother or father since the summer of 1997, over 2 years before, could only swallow the lump in her throat and give the other woman a feeble smile. She took a deep breath and soldiered on. "Dr. Smith gave us some more detailed guidelines yesterday. I've made a copy of my notes for you," she said, extracting the piece of paper and passing it to Amelia. "Thank you," Amelia said. "Did you get much done on Saturday without me?" "I did, actually. Hopefully this weekend we can work on it together." "Surely not this weekend!" Amelia's tinkling laugh carried over the low morning conversations of the other students in the class. "It's the Halloween soirée Saturday night." To Hermione's mind, this did not seem like the conflict that Amelia apparently thought it was. She was not certain why a party on Saturday night would prevent them from working Sunday afternoon, for instance. Draco and Theo entered the classroom then. Both wizards offered a nod in their direction. "What do you plan to wear Saturday night?" Amelia asked offhandedly. "I've got my outfit ready. I really hope Draco likes it." Hermione smiled genuinely for one of the first times in this conversation. "I'm going as Elizabeth Bennet, from Pride and Prejudice." "Oh, that's adorable! And you're not worried about it looking too frumpy?" Amelia's eyes were wide with innocence. The instructor, Dr. Smith, entered, signaling the start of class. Amelia scurried away to her seat, preventing Hermione from answering, which was truly for the best, since she had nothing nice to say. Back in the flat, Hermione's heartbeat quickened to see an envelope addressed to her on the kitchenette table, but her brief hopes that it might be from her parents were dashed almost immediately, as she recognized Slughorn's loopy scroll.
Miss Granger, please accept my most sincere apologies for any minuscule part I might have played in your current cohabitation's predicaments. I can assure you that was not my intention in writing a recommendations letter. Mr. Ketterlaus of the Accommodations Office at Oxford assures me that this was a one-time error, and that it should be fixed for the next Michaelmas term. As for my small mistake, please know that I have put into place a foolproof method to ensure that it does not happen again. I have ordered the house elves here at the castle to monitor my eating and drinking habits more closely, to ensure that I have eaten enough proper food to prevent overindulgence in the drink in future. Yours, Professor Horace C. Slughorn, Potions Master, Hogwarts.
Hermione clenched her teeth in frustration. Her expectations for a response from Professor Slughorn to her howler had already been so incredibly low, and yet somehow he had still managed to fall short. His solution was to put the responsibility for his own well-being on the house elves. She incendiated the note with a hefty measure of satisfaction. Thursday, October 28th, 1999.
Miss Granger, can you stay after, please?
Dr. Zimmerman's no-nonsense voice stopped her as she packed up her things after Potions licensing and regulations that Thursday. Hermione nodded mutely at the elder instructor. Theo raised an inquiring brow at her as he passed, but she stayed impassive.
I must confess, Miss Granger, as an instructor, I was expecting to be far more impressed with you.
Dr. Zimmerman began when the two of them were alone. Hermione flushed. I never wanted or planned to have that kind of fame.
I don't mean any of that, girl. I'm strictly talking about your classwork. After all, I worked alongside Horace Slughorn in Heidelberg years ago, when both of us were completing our masteries. He's quite knowledgeable, and he was highly complimentary of your academic talents,
Dr. Zimmerman said briskly, her tight grey curls moving to the staccato rhythm of her words. Oh, was all Hermione could muster.
The older woman nodded. Your initial assessment examination scores were shockingly low in both this class and in some of your others, as you are well aware. What I fail to understand is this. Your grades in your Muggle classes seem unaffected. Are you putting more effort into them and neglecting your magical law studies?
Tears threatened to fall from her eyes, and Hermione looked to the ceiling and blinked quickly to dispel them. No, Dr. Zimmerman. To be very honest, I'm uncertain how this has happened.
The instructor nodded. Luckily for you, the initial assessment examinations do not factor into term grades. However, if you don't show marked improvement by the halfway point of the term, I must warn you that many in my career field will come up with their own assumptions about your abilities.
She murmured, I understand, Doctor. Thank you for your honesty.
The corridor was empty when she left the classroom, and she was grateful. Stumbling her way past several more doors, she located the women's toilet, thankfully unoccupied this late in the day. She stood at the sink, her eyes trained upon her reflection in the mirror. She almost did not recognize herself. Her lack of sleep and her worries about her grades and her parents, Draco and Amelia and Harry and Ron, all of it was catching up to her.
I don't know how much more I can take of this,
she whispered to herself, as the unshed tears began to flow. Turning on the cold water tap on full blast, she gulped 3 greedy handfuls, then splashed her face. The next time she cupped her hands beneath the faucet to cool her heated cheeks, her left wrist caught on the hot water faucet. A slight tug, followed by a snapping sound, and the charms of her bracelet, the bracelet given to her by her parents the day she turned 10,
were circling the drain. Her wet fingers grabbed futilely at the sloshing circle of the bowl, fishing up what they could. But for many of the charms it was simply too late. The cold water carried them swiftly down the drain. Of the original 10 charms, she had managed to save only 2, a tiny book and a little roller skate whose wheels actually spun, and the unusual pin from Advisor Perkins. "Accio charms," she said in a shaky voice, pointing her wand at the sink. But with the entire building warded against any kind of magic from students, the spell did nothing. She checked her watch. It was after 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. There were no magical classes on Fridays, which meant that there would likely be no one to help until Monday. "Fuck," she whispered futilely, even as her tears doubled. Her hands grabbed hold of the sink basin as though it were a life-preserver, the only thing keeping her afloat at the moment. When she left her house in Heathsgate that night years before, she had been intent upon erasing herself as quickly as possible. She had kept so little from her former life, and now one of the most important things she had was broken, gone, possibly irretrievable. Yet, from the back of her mind a voice seemed to ask, does it even matter? Her parents did not care enough about her to write even a simple letter in response to hers. That bracelet had been given to a different Hermione. It no more belonged to this version of herself than her parents did. Perhaps the charms disappearing down the drain was just a tiny taste of karma, she thought. Dropping the broken chain and the 2 charms into a pocket of her rucksack, she turned her attention to the little pin given to her by Advisor Perkins. Yet another thing she probably didn't deserve to own, she thought. Access to the magical buildings here at Oxford. "No!" A stronger, more resolved voice inside her head said firmly, "You are better than this. All of this is a minor setback. You'll prove to them, to everyone, that you belong here, just like you did when you were 11 years old." She lifted her chin, attaching the little pin to her berry-coloured scarf that had come loose from around her neck. As she walked across Tom Quad, she made subtle movements to fix the pin to the scarf with a permanent sticking charm, then glamoured the pin to be invisible. There. Now she was the only one able to see it. This pin represented everything she was working for. Her law degree, her future, her place within the wizarding world. She would not lose this, too. Thank you for listening to Who Gives a Fuck About an Oxford Comma by Great78. If you enjoyed the story and would like to listen to more, please follow me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Silver and Copper. Or you can find me under Great78 on Archive of Our Own.